In the last video I promised that this one would be about fixing the stereo and doing some sort of cleaning. Sort of a tidying up after seemingly finishing the big project of getting rid of engine sputter, or whatever the technical terminology would be. Well, that just didn't work out. The noise came back, so I was scratching my head and puzzling over how to take care of that since I didn't know what the root cause was. I had just sent back the new distributor I had ordered as the backup, and those funds quickly found a way to be lost to me. So I had to wait to try out the distributor fix. Quick cut in. I'm super proud of myself for actually catching this. I was about to call the script finished and start the video editing part of it, but realized that I had to go back and take it to the shop. So let's talk about that now. I went on a test drive with my high school engineering technology teacher, masked up the whole shebang. Not a whole lot went on. The distributor cap and rotor fix was still at a point where the engine wasn't acting up so violently as before and now. But we checked fluids and realized transmission fluid was very low. Very low. And there were metal shavings coming out onto the dipstick. So I drove it to a shop to have them do a flush and fill. They got all the gunk out, but then the transmission fluid pan started leaking, or what I can only assume was the pan. The car went back and forth to get resealed and filled a couple of times before they were able to tell me that the drive axle wasn't properly seated, and once that was affirmed to be in place, I didn't have any transmission leaks, so now my fluid levels are all good. After that, and while waiting for the funds to buy a new distributor, a noise toward the rear of the car started trumpeting through the body to the cabin. I had some assumptions, but was still untrained, so I took a test drive with Craig, our auto shop teacher, and then we put it up on the lift for the first time. We found a fun exhaust leak at the flange joint between the emitter and resonator pipe. Craig helped me come up with the cheap plan to replace the emitter pipe and fabricate a resonator pipe flange socket that could slide over the old end after cutting off the rusted through flange joint. I got all the parts and they seemed to work just well. The converter pipe slides in the flange and over the emitter pipe just fine. The gasket holes line up too. Now I just need some time on the shop's lift, right? Well, I guess I don't need the lift, but I wanted it badly. Then fall break happened, and we shifted to e-learning schedule. Then Thanksgiving break happened. Then I got to work. I learned how to weld. And this always gets commenters excited because they get to provide lessons. And we all know that textual lessons via comment are so much better than having two trained professionals who are actually also trained teachers. Anyway, I got to do some practice welding, and while this isn't my first time welding, it is the first time I've done something other than two rectangles of steel lapped over each other. It's the first time I've done something that will be used instead of just looked at. I did some welding in high school with a TIG welder for maybe a 30-minute lesson. The second time was in college, where I did MIG welding during lab for a metals manufacturing class. This one is MIG welding too, but the wire is much thinner and less clunky than my lab experience. All three experiences have been of different styles, teaching methods, and end purposes. But before talking too much and maybe tipping everyone off with how little I know about welding, let's just see what past tense Josh does on the flange.
Don't be afraid to get down a little bit more. But I think other than that, yeah. Other than that, it's looking good. Looks good.
Hey, not too bad, I don't think. Fun fact, Josh is also a verb, so I think from this point out I'll be referring to past tense Josh as joshed. I got the probe back onto the lift and tried taking off the pipe clamps at the muffler so that, theoretically, I didn't have to take off the muffler from their exhaust hangers. But many of these bolts and nuts were rusted to themselves, so hangers it was. These rubber hangers were actually fairly pliable considering how old they are. Farther into the video, I'll get to show you the difference between old and new polymers, and it did take some finagling, but I got the components unhung. The cool part about trying to take this apart, though, is I got to realize fully just how much of a leak there was at the flange and elsewhere. The resonator pipe basically snapped off at the flange joint. A bolt also snapped in the resonator pipe to catalytic converter joint, so I'll have to deal with 3 different sets of hardware, meaning nuts and bolts, when putting this back together. But honestly, I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried about it. It's not going to bother me. But now that it's off, let's take a look at what we have to work with. We even have a rust spot on the resonator pipe that we'll need to patch. I needed to cut off the old, rusted through flange joint in the hopes that the new flange would just slide on, so there was some marking required there. In between, there's that through bolt that was rust welded to the flange, so I needed to take care of that. During this episode especially, I've learned that comfort with tools in general isn't really a thing. I've been around power tools and heavy machinery all my life, but new tools always take some time before I feel comfortable. A grinder, for example, is one of those tools. Now the flange joint. I said that I had hopes for the newly welded flange joint and that the converter pipe would just slide over the resonator as it did with the emitter. I figured they would both be the same diameter, but nope. And so, butt weld it is. This time I let Matt help out, but joints and lap joints are very different and wanted to get somebody with a little bit more experience behind the wheel. We put everything back together under the car so Matt could put some tack welds while I took care of cleaning up the flange near the catalytic converter. And while it was on the ground, we got a better look at the hangers and fabricated a new bracket to cover the rusted bracket. Nothing amazing, just some bent metal, but let's give Matt some space to do his welding.
We're on there.
Fully patched, I can now put the exhaust back together. It's important to use your head on a project like this. Flange joint to catalytic converter. New pipe clamp for the new emitter pipe. Put the muffler back into place using the hangers, of course. And then wrench it all down. Off camera, I tightened to 89 Newton meters, and I'll give you a torque wrench on camera later down the line so you know you can trust me. Afterwards, the distributor arrived and I spent Christmas Eve replacing that. I had grand visions for titling this episode, "Do You Hear What I Hear?" since I had so many noise issues, but what I'm about to do to the car, while necessary anyway, isn't going to solve the root cause of my issue. When I was going back and forth about replacing the cap and rotor versus the entire unit, I had thought doing the entire unit would be a large undertaking with alignment issues, and while there was shaft alignment that I needed to worry about, replacing the distributor wasn't nearly as hard as I let myself believe. Once I took the old one out, I clocked the new shaft so that it would align as the bearing fit into the housing. After just some gentle persuasion, it went right in. There was some work yet to do for checking the phase of the distributor and, of course, putting the intake back together, but eventually it started right up and out I went to shake it down. And then I came back because what I wanted to be fixed wasn't fixed, and after letting myself breathe for a minute, I went back, took a look at it, realized that there was an air hose between the filter box and the intake manifold that was cracked severely, so I ordered a new one thinking that that would be the end of my worries. In all, I think I spent less than $250 during the making of this video. The thought behind ordering this part and thinking it was an important fix was in the different sensor readings. There's the oxygen sensor, and then there's the MAF sensor. There's all sorts of sensors that are measuring the amount of air coming in and out of the engine. So while the mass airflow sensor was providing the computer with a reading, it wasn't giving actual, and so ratios would be off. The new one came in pretty quick, and wow, it's much more flexible than the original hose. I guess that's why it's recommended to replace belts and hoses when buying an older vehicle, and I'd love to do that someday, hopefully soon, but let's replace this one and test it out before thinking about next steps. Back to you, Josh. There's the torque wrench. Told you. Now let's do our final test. Initial impressions, hopeful. So we're at a stoplight. Engine temperature is at the point where it would be if it were to start sputtering. I also don't have any electrical draw with my blowers with anything. Oh, looks like I might have that sputter. So we just got back from the test drive. Car's still running because I want to show / give you guys the audio of what's going on, what I mean by sputtering. Right now we're in park, no brakes are applied. The engine is warm, and this only happens after the engine warms up. If we go into drive, then it starts becoming a little bit, you know, it's engaged obviously, and that's perfect. That's what it should do, I think. But now as we put on some electrical stuff, so I'm gonna put on max AC. We're gonna have it blow. You should have gotten a shaky camera, so even if the blowers drowned out the noise, you should have still been able to get it. Blowers are on to low, and it's still sputtering right now. It's quieted down right now. I'll turn it off because it's a little obnoxious. Now we're in park again. So here's what I've done. I have checked spark plugs. I haven't replaced them. I've checked spark plugs. I've checked spark plug spacing, and everything's kosher there. I replaced the distributor and the distributor cap. Things helped for a little bit. I replaced the oxygen sensor, a VRIS solenoid, which VRIS solenoid I hear is not crucial to what's going on here. But the O2 sensor could have been the culprit. That was the first thing that I did. I replaced the distributor entirely. Was very hopeful about that. Nothing happened. I have a crack in my intake manifold, so I replaced that. And I don't know what's going on after that. It's electrical, I think. As more things are turned on, then the more rugged the ride is. I've said time and time again that I'm not a car guy, but this is what I think is going on when the engine is sputtering. Okay, so what's visibly happening is the engine is lurching, visibly. And so, you know, maybe there's bracketry going on, and I could dampen that and it could be fine, maybe, but that wouldn't replace the root cause, and I want to take care of the root cause. When it's doing it, when it's lurching, it's tilting to the front, which means the left-hand side is going down and the right-hand side is coming up. And when I say it's visible, I'm not saying inches, I'm saying a couple thou, but it is visible. I don't think it's a ground issue because it's only occurring when the engine is heated up, and the ground issue theoretically would still be happening while it was warming up if it was in something electrical. I think a sensor is doing something wrong or misreading something, but I don't know where, I don't know what. I have no engine codes to give me any help. If you've seen this before and your fix has not been any of the things that I've already done, the distributor, spark plug check, airflow sensing, or vacuum fixing, then reach out to me, let me know. The title of this episode is Love It or List It. And there are some things that I love about this, but they're not enough to replace what's going on, and that's causing the discomfort while I'm driving. So I'm right now thinking about listing it. Tell me in the comments what you think I should do, because I like this car a lot and I would like to keep it, but I've been out of my wheelhouse the entire time, and right now I'm at a point where I don't know what to do anymore. So in the comments, tell me what you think, and also subscribe, because, you know, even if I do list it, there will still be other things going on my channel. I have this probe. You can see a taillight right there. that's still being fixed, that's still being worked on. I do a monthly series for analyzing cars within film, and obviously, since I'm a teacher, I'm still putting out some educational stuff, and I'm trying to make it so that this audience would like it too. But yeah, subscribe. There's a bell that I think that you should click on so that you can get notified of when I'm doing more stuff. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.